Hi, I'm Paul Carroll. I'm the editor-in-chief at Insurance Thought Leadership. I am delighted to be joined here today by Olav Cuiper, who is the Chief Client Officer at RGA. We're having this conversation as part of the expert series of interviews following the Global Insurance Forum put on recently by the International Insurance Society. This happens to be a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And it's, I think, going to be unusually productive, not only because of Olav's background and because of RGA's heft in this area, but because Olav is new to this role. So we'll have a fresh perspective on some things. So Olav, this role as Chief Client Officer is new to you and, in fact, new to RGA. So how are you going to solve all the problems in the next 3 months?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. But what I didn't tell, I'm a magician, so everything's possible. But yeah, it's a new role to RGA, and I think it was at the right time that our CEO Anna Manning decided to kind of, in her words, put the client's voice at the executive table, because previously I've been leading the EMEA region, as we call it, for the last 10 years. And so we have the Asian region, North America, Canada, Australia, etc. And the danger is that I think it's fair to say we're a very client-focused organization, but it sometimes are so many different initiatives that there needs to be a certain blanket, if you like, or coordination at the top level, of the company. And I would say so far so good. So it has to do with marketing, it has to do with brand, but it also has to do with global clients. It also has to do with partnerships. It's a lot what we kind of need to do to maintain a good client-centric position.
So back when I was a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, we used to talk about what we called the why now, why this story now, as opposed to some other time. And from your perspective or the RGA perspective, why would you say now was the right time to set up this position?
The why now has kind of two answers in my perspective. The why now is, first of all, an internal perspective, because the growth of our company, we've grown quite a bit over the last 10, 15 years. So that brings more size, more people, but also more complexity. So it's when you're a company with thousands of 1,200 people, it's relatively easy to coordinate efforts. When the company gets bigger, it gets more complicated. So that is probably internal driver. The external driver is that our environment, and if I like to call it ecosystem, is getting more complex. So the clients are getting, our clients, the insurance companies, are getting more complex, bigger. There is another wave of consolidation going on. So how do we best serve our clients? To quote Dirk Malmquist, are we high enough, wide enough, and deep enough in our clients? So that is the external driver, and that's the complexity on the outside world. And there are so many new actors in terms of technology, in terms of distribution. So yeah, I think these are the two drivers on the why now.
That makes sense. Certainly from what I see with the sorts of things we publish, consumers are getting more demanding. There's been this sort of revolution in customer demands over the last 20, 25 years, because people have been able to see what Amazon and so forth are able to do in the way of customer service. And then the technology tools are also getting better. You can touch me in many more ways than you used to be able to touch me before I had a phone, basically attached to my hip, and a Apple Watch on my wrist or whatever the whole time. Do you have a particular example that you tend to think of as good customer engagement as you try to figure out what sort of model to present to folks at RGA?
Yeah, I have a number, and on the previous topic, I also do think that COVID accelerated a lot of trends in terms of technology, but also in terms of how do we deal with clients and the maybe digital customer journey in many ways. So that brings me to the answer to your question. I think after post-COVID, and you see I'm an optimist, I'm supposing that COVID is largely behind us. But post-COVID, we see much more attention and effort in what I would call the customer journey, the digital customer journey, and that can have different distribution outlets, whether it's a bank or an agent or direct or whatever. But many of our clients are looking at that, and so we've been able to help a lot of clients with that digital customer journey via partnerships, but also via tooling, via digital underwriting, and you name it. So I think one of the kind of key elements as we speak today is that digital journey of the end customers, and that's what clients are asking us. And of course we deliver product IDs, of course we deliver the expertise, etc., etc. That's what we have always have done, but the shift to that is clear to me.
Yeah, I would imagine that the kinds of things you can deal with people on is also maybe changed a little bit because of COVID. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that in a confusing environment like COVID, people aren't just looking for insurance, they're looking for advice. And to the extent that you can be sort of the voice of wisdom for them, I think to me that seems like it opens up an opportunity. But I wonder if that's your reaction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And during COVID, that was ongoing, and that focused more on the here and now. Can you help us with claims? Can you do some data analysis, etc., etc.? So that is when the platform was on fire, so to speak. And I think the good news of that for me is, and that sounds, it's not meant to be cynical, because we've paid over 2.5 billion of claims, COVID claims. So there's nothing funny about that. But the good news is about that the relevance of what we do, and the relevance of what we do as an industry has demonstrated itself. So we do organize financial protection for people, and that's also kind of our purpose as a company, that we say, okay, well, what's what you do? Well, make financial protection accessible. And my kind of hope, but also wish for the future, is that we as an industry do more of that. There is so much more we can do in terms of protecting underserved and underdeveloped markets.
Right. And it seems to me that COVID, as awful as it has been, does give the insurance industry a great story to tell, because that's the moment of need. It's when insurance companies were supposed to be stable and responsible and pay the claims and help people and so forth. And as far as I can tell, that's been a good story for the industry to tell, and I would think would set up good conversations, and ones with customers where they would, more than in the past, accept that the insurance company is there actually to help them. Not just take their money and be sort of quiet until maybe something happens somewhere down the road. But there's a good story to tell there, I think. I was asking about client engagement that you think has worked especially well from the RGA standpoint. Are there other industries you look to or other companies you look to that you think could be models for RGA as you help shape the client engagement?
Yeah, of course, we look at other financial or not financial companies. How do they engage with their customers? We look at financial institutions. We look at all kind of industries. In the end, we think at RGA, it's quite specific business to financial professional industry. So we are one step remote from the final customer, but at the same time, we need to be very close to the final customer, because we need to understand the trends. We need to understand, and we need to kind of have a discussion with our clients on emerging trends and what we think we see and what we think relevant data is, how we best can help unlock those markets. So I didn't, but that's maybe my flaw. I didn't come across very good similarities in other industry. You can look at, let's say, in my head, the wholesale banker model, that there is one responsible person serving the client. That's what we strive for, but that's nothing new. So yeah, and I think it's also fair to say I'm pretty comfortable in the position where we are, and that's also acknowledged in NMG surveys and whatever. But there is no room for complacency. So if we're now number one or number two or whatever in a region in terms of business capabilities, kind of awarded by our clients, that is not to say that it's good enough 3 years from now. So we're constantly evolving.
That's interesting. And I, as somebody who's covered a lot of industries over the years, I find insurance interesting, because you do in a lot of cases have this 3-tiered setup that you don't have in other industries. I mean, you are dealing with a middle person, as you say, before you get to the end customer. And I think that sometimes this created confusion, but I suppose also opportunity for those who figure it out, because you have to figure out whether your customer is that intermediary or it's the end customer. And of course, it's both, but they have a relationship as well that makes things a little complicated. But it does sound like wholesale banking is one that that would resonate. You talk about, you mentioned 2 or 3 years in the future. I always find it interesting to try to future cast a little bit. I know you're fairly new in this role, but if you were to pick a spot 2 or 3 or 5 years out, is there one thing in particular that you might be thinking about that would be a great accomplishment to have when you then look back on the job some years down the road from there?
Yeah, there is as you can understand, I have a kind of a list with or a wish list with accomplishment, but one of them that springs to mind is in 3 years from now, I think we should have organized ourselves as RGA and as industry around the digital customer journey. What we now see is a huge amount of initiatives across the globe, which some of them have similarities, others have not. I think that is one thing. That's on our plate. That's what we need to do, but also what the industry needs to think about. And the other I would say is, as 3 years to come up with more meaningful solutions in the insurance space. To give you an example, in my view, the next pandemic is called diabetics. It's massive around the world. We are doing good stuff with creating online communities on social media to raise awareness, etc., etc. But that is, yeah, that is one other on my wish list. Another one on my wish list, and then I'll stop, Paul. But the other one is to come up with meaningful solutions for the aging population, which is in many parts of the world a growing, well, not to say a problem, but it asks for different solutions for people in the later stage in their lives. So those three spring to mind when you ask that question.
Here, here. I love wish lists, and it happens that type 2 diabetes is one that I've focused on some over the years because of some work I've done with the American Medical Association. And obesity is a huge problem here in the US. And of course, type 2 diabetes and hypertension can be downstream from that. So even beyond what I would say about other things, I really wish you well on that one. I think that's massively important. You talked a bit about longevity and sort of the RGA positioning. You guys are coming up on your 50th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder how this idea all sort of fits into to what you're thinking about as you hit that milestone with the company.
Yeah, the upcoming 50th anniversary, and I have to disclose, and I was present at the 40th anniversary as well. But I think it's a landmark for RGA. It's and if I look at our to our competitors, for some of them 50 years is nothing, but I think it's a good landmark. It's a good landmark to stand still and reflect on who we are and what we bring, but it's also a good time to look a little bit more to the future. So our role in society, okay, what are we giving to society? What service do we provide? And if we look ahead, what we think we see in front of us. So I'm at this day and age, I'm really happy that we have that event, because for us it's a good way to get in touch with our clients and have that discussion. I believe any company with its clients, it should be a system of conversation. So it's never us inventing the wheel for the I don't know how many time, but it's in conversations with your customers, in conversations with markets, you come up with new solutions. And I think 50th anniversary is almost a natural moment to sit down with clients and say, hey, how do we look at the future together? What do we see? Do we see the same thing? Where can we help?
Right. So innovation in big corporations has been really my focus for the last 30 years, and is in fact what attracted me to insurance in the first place. It seemed like a massively important industry, and one where innovation wasn't necessarily something that people often associated with the industry. It's sort of pulling some of the strands together, what you've been talking about. It always seemed to me that innovation has to happen on behalf of the customer. And as you say, you have to know what the customer wants and sort of talk with them to figure out what you want to do together. I was happy to see you nod your head a little bit. So I was going to ask first whether you agreed with that, and second, how you think about taking what you know and what you will learn as the chief client officer and feed that into the innovation efforts at RGA more broadly.
Yeah, and I was nodding because I was sitting here agreeing with what you were saying, but I'm not a big believer in kind of let's say, okay, we have thought long and hard about it, and here's our innovation. if I look back at the successful innovation we've seen, it's always a cooperation with the client. And sometimes it starts really, really small. It can start with a small digital distribution or online distribution of insurance products. And that's totally fine. And then we look if it's work, if it's scalable, can we replicate it, etc., etc. And that's how innovation starts. It never starts, or almost never starts, in kind of a insurance laboratory and say, okay, we now found it's not a COVID vaccine. It's a conversation between us and clients, and understand where they are going, really understand the different distribution models. Bank insurance requires very different solutions compared to agents, compared to direct, and allow yourself to experiment and allow yourself to fail as well. You will not hear me say that we are kind of only successes. No, of course not. We did try and we did fail, and then you stop the initiative, or after a couple of years you find out it's not scalable, or it's not sizable, and that's fine. I'm cool with that.
I'd certainly agree violently there. Probably the best book I've ever written was one called $1 Billion Lessons, and it was the lessons to be learned from corporate failure. It came out in 2008, sort of around the time Jim Collins was so popular with all his books on lessons to be learned from success stories. And my point was, you have to learn from success stories, but you also have to learn from failures. So I believe in that very much. You used one of my favorite words earlier, ecosystems. And I wonder if you'd reflect a little bit on how things are different now, because in a lot of ways you are going to market through an ecosystem rather than just going as RGA. When you think about innovation, how does working within an ecosystem maybe change the way you approach innovation and approach the clients?
Yeah, and I think I use the word ecosystem a lot in my conversations, and but in my view, the kind of value chain, as you and I probably learned at business school, that really doesn't exist anymore. It's not a linear process from A to B, and we're now in we have so many actors. So how does an ecosystem work? In my view, we come across a problem statement or an opportunity with a client, and then we look in our ecosystem, and that's the key role, in my view, for RGA, that we are well connected in the ecosystem, because it would be an illusion to say that we can handle everything ourselves. We're a reinsurance company. We're not an IT company. So we have to have meaningful, dedicated technology partnerships in our ecosystem. Then when we come across an opportunity that we can say to the client, but hey, we know a distribution platform, to stick with that example. We know a distribution platform that might be able to help you, and we kind of jointly can set it up or build it or whatever. And that can be same thing with specific sets of data. We have a lot of data, and sometimes we need other data. We need to combine those efforts to come up with a better solution for clients. So, and that is all in the ecosystem. So, and the ones who, in my view, the ones who have a good working, connected ecosystem or infrastructure, or whatever words you want to use, these are the winners of tomorrow.
Oh, I think it has to be that way. When you were talking about COVID and the claims you'd paid and so forth, it seems to me that that's been something of a wake-up call. And I wonder how much you are seeing people pay more attention to life insurance now than they maybe did 3 years ago. But life insurance is one of the parts of the industry that just puzzled me because it seems so natural, and yet there is such a gap between the protection that people have and what I think they would benefit from. Are you seeing some change in thinking based on COVID?
Well, there is a thing what I would like to see and hope to see, and there is a thing what I do see. So the protection gap, let me be clear, still exists. The underserved markets or the lower income markets in many places still exists, and that's I guess upon us as an industry to deliver meaningful products and meaningful protection products to those groups. Of course, you see that there is more interest in life insurance. Do we see that necessarily in higher volumes? That is probably too early days to tell. But I think the first I mentioned, that's more the task, the challenge, almost the obligation upon us that we have large underserved markets to take care of. And that should be the lesson of COVID.
And I've seen the new RGA purpose statement about making financial protection accessible to all. So it certainly seems like that's something that the whole company is rallying behind.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about, and making financial protection accessible means exactly that. So look ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, what do we do to achieve that purpose or to live by that purpose? And you can translate it maybe in my own head, I translate it as accelerate well-being, and that can be the examples I mentioned earlier. It can be diabetics, it can be longevity, it can be aging population, it can be microinsurance in Africa. It goes so many ways, but they're all very relevant and meaningful for people.
So I think we probably have time for one more topic, maybe briefly, and then I'll ask you for some final thoughts. I find ESG to be an interesting topic, partly because I believe so much in the environmental, social, and governance goals. For those of us who live in the US and think, we invented everything, I found it educational that this movement really began in Europe and then is extending around the world from there. Do you have any thoughts on how the ESG movement is developing and sort of where it might go from here?
Yes, I do, and it's also, it's back to the previous question. I think as an industry we should very much also focus on the S, on the social part. So what exactly are we providing? Do we really provide meaningful products to kind of lower income groups, underserved markets, etc., where I talked earlier about, and the other thing is what is going on, and I think that's a very good thing, and you can read it in our ESG report, but that especially it started in Europe with clients demanding a certain standard from us in terms of investments, etc., and to be very clear, that is not a compliance exercise. If we do exit, and we do, if we exit carbon unfriendly investments, we do make things better. So I think, so that is on the E part, and that's an ongoing activity with certain differences across the globe. I think the intensity in Europe, where it started, is a little bit higher compared to Asia and North America, but nevertheless we're getting there, and it's also upon ourselves to take care of the S component, the social component, and that's what we've been talking on for the last half hour.
Well, I hope you're right about that. I would love to set a conversation on our calendars from 2 years, 3 years from now, and sort of, look back and see how it all went. But I would hope that that's one where there's been a lot of progress as well. So any final words to sort of summarize what we've talked about in terms of client service, customer engagement, innovation, ESG, and so forth? What final words do you want to leave people with?
Yeah, well, the final words, that sounds a little bit heavy, but if I try to summarize our conversation, I think we're in extremely exciting times at the moment, coming out of a worldwide pandemic. And to a certain extent, we need to reinvent ourselves, reinvent how we organize our ecosystem. And I think there has never been so much uncertainty, or never, I don't know, but for the foreseeable past, there has never been so much uncertainty in the world as it is today. So, and that means we need to have our eye very much on the ball and make sure that we play a strategic role in that ecosystem to best serve our clients and to best serve the industry, and in the end to best serve the end customer.
That's great. Again, I appreciate your taking the time. I found the conversation very interesting. Customers make the world go round, and the more we can attune ourselves to what's going on there, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So I will just thank you for taking the time. I encourage people to follow up with RGA, with the International Insurance Society, and to check out the other interviews and then the sessions from the recent forum. And beyond that, I'll just thank you and let you get on with your evening.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.